Good morning, guys. Last time that talked, we talked about Moses and his trek through from Egypt to Midian, and from there back to Egypt. And we touched on his period, the time period that he was in the wilderness. And I want to see if there are any questions in reference to that before I attempt to do an overview and relate to you some of the things I was shown. I guess I was while I was asleep or in between that sleep and awake. So, are there any questions? No questions, no comments. Are there any questions about anything that has caught you and I during the course of the week? Okay, well, let me,
This,
before I get started.
Pastor, what's your take on
Yes, ma'am.
the Rittenhouse verdict?
Great minds think alike, huh? Because that's where I was headed before I get to Moses.
Oh, okay.
Uh, my initial response to it was not what I thought it would be because I expected it to end up this way. So I guess in a way I was prepared. However, I do understand people being upset, some being angry. I understand that. However, if we look at it based upon what we have been teaching, what we see spiritually, then we must see the glass is half full as opposed to as half empty. And by that, I mean this is an opportunity for more people to pause in their lives and see what's really going on. It is it is a catalyst to continue the move towards balance, equality, justice, however you want to use it. I think that we must remember that change does not come in a minute. Change is not something you do this moment. Change is a movement, and movements take time. I believe that the verdict showed us where we stand, as if we didn't already know. I do want us to be cognizant of something, though. During the abolitionist period, the abolitionists talked about the freedom of the enslaved. They talked about the enslaved being human, but they did not believe that the African was as human as the Caucasian. They believed that we needed to be nurtured and have parental control. When in today's movement we call them liberals as opposed to abolitionists. And the liberals talk about police reform and equal justice. But the euphemism that they use is social justice. And social justice is another way of saying I'm with you, but I'm not, or it is saying I am totally with you. I do believe that Caucasians who mean well pick up on keywords, and social justice just happen to be it now. And we have to take the verbiage and make it what it should be. We cannot allow them to give context to what social justice looks like. We have to be the ones who gives that context. Just like the white supremacists, the racists use this urban community as a euphemism for African or for black communities. That's the ones who mean well have theirs as well. I do also believe that we must be extremely influential and believe and know that we are when it comes to people who are like Biden and others who speak as he does, that they are vacillating. Excuse me. They want things to change, but they want things to remain the same more than they want them to change. They, for so long, have been engaged in bait and switch. We're going to do this for you if you elect us, but it never happens. And that same thing happened when Biden was elected. The difference is that women of color primarily, who are in the House, the progressive movement, has put pressure on them. And the Democrats now can no longer play that game of bait and switch without being exposed. And I think that it is that we should notice that it is primarily women of color who are pushing on the agenda of balance and equality. And I also think we should notice that the most vocal initial one after Shirley Chisholm was Maxine Waters. And now other women of color have picked up on their mantra for change. Are there any questions about that? Does that answer your question? Or are there any comments?
You can't get like that. It's so.
Audrey?
I'm here.
Yeah.
I just think I wasn't surprised. I was a bit shocked, but not surprised. But shocked that he got off on everything. I mean, and I don't understand why the judge threw out the charge of illegally possessing the weapon. But anyway,
The reason?
but
I can tell you why.
Okay, go ahead.
The reason he threw that charge out is because there was no way around it. The two charges that he threw out were reckless endangerment. That was true because he fired into a crowd. Possessing an illegal weapon by being underage, there was no way around that. That was true. They could not deny that. So what he actually did was let stand the charges that they could go either way on, that did not present themselves in a clear fashion. I also see that not only was the judge biased in what he did by throwing out the charges, but the witness who got shot is also a witness for the defense, even though the prosecution put him on the stand. I'm done.
Pastor.
Yes.
Good morning. This is Kathy. One of the things I wanted to point out as well that can be very easily missed if you're not paying attention, and I've shared this with you and Ron. I have two former 18-year-old students. One committed the crime of rape and carjacking. The other one committed the crime for gang initiation, killing his best friend. Both of those young men who are 18 years old got 60 years. And if you're not watching what's happening when Trump stacked the courts and did these kinds of things, you will miss what's going on because it's happening and nobody's saying anything. So what they're doing with the young black males now is through incarceration, they're taking their entire future away from them. And that irony was not lost on me when I saw the verdict yesterday, and I just wanted to share that. I'm done.
Thank you. Audrey, were you finished?
Yeah, I think so. But I forget what I was gonna say. But I'm not shocked by, I'm not surprised by the verdict. But I don't understand it. But then again, who am I? I don't know. I can't remember what I was gonna say, but anyway, go ahead.
Well, if you do, that's fine. When Kathy made the statement about taking the entire future away, this is totally different. That's an escalation of incarceration. At one time, it was the black males were imprisoned at 15, 16 years old, or 18 to, and then when they were like 25 to 30, they were out after they passed those years of courtship, marriage, child, that kind of thing. Now they have escalated that, and the escalation of it has increased the amount of time that they are giving our African males for the infractions of the crimes that they're committing. And as she said, they're taking their future away from them totally. At least prior to that, they had an opportunity, though small, it was indeed small opportunity. They had an opportunity to regain a future or to move in that direction. But now that when they get out, they are so old until they've lost contact with the changes in society itself. So, Audrey, if you do think of what you were going to say, please just interrupt or raise the question and make the statement, okay?
Okay. All right, will do.
Okay. Is there anyone else? No comments, no questions? Okay.
Pastor?
Yes.
Hey, this is Evelyn. I hope Barbara is on the line. You're about to go through with the Moses, sum up with the thing with Moses.
I'm going to recap and then show you what I have been shown.
Okay.
Barbara Jean.
Yes.
Hey.
Hi.
You had spoken with Evelyn and about some aspects of Moses and the burning bush. Would you like to repeat? I
was going to say Evelyn and I did discuss it a little. I think the question was, Evelyn, what was the question?
Well, we talked about what the meaning of the burning bush was, and then I asked you why was it a bush, and it was a lot was said, but in little words, if that makes sense. But you told me that he had to recognize that the bush was burning, something to that nature.
Oh, I gotcha.
Okay.
We talked about the burning bush, and you asked the question relative to that bush. And I believe what I said was that how many of us would take the time to see something occurring and then see, i.e., how many of us would see a burning bush and just say, oh, that's just a burning bush? How many of us would take the time to attend to it, to look at it, to observe it, and to see that, well, it's not operating the way an ordinary burning bush should operate. In other words, it should be being consumed. And so I think what we talked about was the fact that sometimes things happen in our lives to capture our attention, but we just pay it a cursory glance, and that's all. Moses didn't do this. He didn't just do a cursory glance and then continue on doing what he was doing. He went over to investigate why this bush was not being consumed, and so it was not only attention getting, but he initiated the greater intensity of observation, and that's what we've got to do too. When things just seem cursory, like Rittenhouse, like whatever, we've got to observe what's going on behind that. I think Kathy and you, Pastor, talked about the fact that they're trying to take every opportunity for future away from our children by incarcerating them much longer. That's what's happening behind something like a Rittenhouse, the burning bushes that, well, he should have been consumed. He should have, the verdict should have been that he's going to jail. Well, he's out there and he's still walking around. So instead of being distracted by that, let's look at what it means underneath. And that's what Moses did. He took the time, once his attention was given, he took the time to go and observe what was happening, that this bush did not burn up. And by him taking that time, that was the opportunity that the Creator spoke to him and apprehended his attention. Is that pretty much what we talked about?
Evelyn?
Oh, I'm just talking with the thing on mute. But anyway, yes, that's what we talked about. And there were other things, but I don't remember. But what you said really summed up what we did talk about. Also, we talked about removing the sandals, and you talked a little bit about that as well.
Oh yeah, you had done some you had done some work on that too. Meaning humility, things like that, right? And then I just added to it that in Eastern custom, when someone would travel, they would get a lot of dust on their feet because it was dusty. It was an arid country. It was a dry country. And if you went to someone's house, the guest would offer the opportunity to, take your sandals off and cleanse your feet. And then what your question related to, why did he have to take his shoes off, his sandals off? Why did the Creator say, take your sandals off the ground you're standing on is holy ground? And we talked about that. And what you didn't talk about was the obvious. The obvious was usually when someone says, take your sandals off, let me wash your feet, it's to keep them clean. When the Creator said, take your sandals off, the ground you're standing on is holy ground, it would still be dusty ground, but that wasn't the point. The point is that wherever the Creator is holy ground. It doesn't necessarily mean that it has to be a dusty area. Wherever the Creator is, and we're the Creator too. Wherever the Creator is holy ground. Was the point I was trying to make. I'm done.
Okay, thank you, Evelyn. Is that it?
For now, yes, sir.
Okay, thank you. I'm glad you're not like the rest of us and say, I'm done, because you're really not.
Excuse me.
That's that's a nice segue into what I want to talk about when you said that wherever the Creator is, there's holy ground. We have talked about the especially the Old Testament being an allegory, a story that is told in order to convey a spiritual truth. And we talked about it is replete with metaphors, the story is. And the metaphors are speaking of one thing, yet it represents something deeper. So what we have understood about the Old Testament in particular is that these were stories that were told verbally. They were not written at first, but they passed them from generation to generation. And the reason that they told the stories the way they did, it was easier for them to be remembered. And as they told the stories, there was always embedded in it hidden truths. And the metaphors in particular is what hid the truth, or what enshrined the truth in such a manner that it would take spiritual contemplation in order to understand what was truly being said. As Barbara talked about the comparisons between the burning bush and Rittenhouse acquittal, those are also metaphors for her conclusion that we are to look at what it means as opposed to what happened in that moment. And when we talked about Moses, we talked about how he killed the Egyptian, which means that, I'll come back to that in a moment, how he killed the Egyptian, left Egypt, went to Midian, met Zipporah and her sisters at the well, ended up with the priests of Midian, and from that, the burning bush, and being joined by Aaron, and going back to Egypt after the miracles, the exit from Egypt of the Hebrews, and they're being there in the wilderness. All of this is speaking to us. It's speaking to us about those things that we realize are detrimental, but we don't openly admit it because we are trained to keep the status quo. We see things that needs to be changed, those portions of us that needs to be severed, but we have a tendency to keep them in a hidden place. So what we are learning is that they need to be exposed. When it's talked about Moses and the Egyptian, it's simply recognizing things that needs to be severed from our lives. And when we don't do it, it has a way of exposing to us that it cannot be hidden any longer. And at that point, we have a choice. We can die in the place where we are, or we can move in a direction that we know our heart is being moved in. And in doing so, we begin to see the spiritual nature of our essence. And that begins when we come to a place where we begin to thirst for what is spiritual in relationship to what we are running from. And it is the Shekinah that begins to show us our priestly nature and the journey that we must take. There are so many times when we begin to make excuses as to why we cannot do it. This is my home church. This is where I was reared. My parents, my relatives, all of them are in this congregation. My relatives are buried in that cemetery, and if I leave, I won't be able to be buried next to my relatives, or I won't have a place to have my funeral, or I will be ostracized by my family as well as my friends. And we began to see that if you were ostracized by your friends, they were not your friends in the first place. You were their friend. And when we think about the family, it's not so much an ostracizing by the family as is the family being silent around us when it comes to spiritual things, because they are not ready to hear the truth about them. And those excuses that we make are no different than what is told in the story of Moses. And when we make those excuses, what we begin to see is that there is opportunity for us to actually move beyond the excuses that we make. And the way we do that is by listening at the Creator. And Moses, in the story of Moses, the excuses were overcome by the Creator saying that Aaron would be his mouthpiece or speak for him. All that is saying is that the Creator is giving us understanding of what our journey should be, and we are making excuses for not taking that journey, and that's when the Aaronic part of us shows up. Aaron begins to show up, and the Aaron is simply when we make a decision that we are going to speak what we hear. And in this particular allegory, what happens is we see that Moses was to be God to Aaron, because he would be telling Aaron what to say. So Moses becomes Elohim, and Aaron becomes the priest to Moses, meaning that the priest speaks what he hears the voice saying, the voice of the Creator saying. And in moving into Egypt and going through the sequence of all of the plagues, and after having gone through that, what we see is there are times when trying things have to take place in our lives, where we have to struggle and we see and experience painful things, and nothing seems to be going right because we have chosen not to do the right thing, and that is in regards to the heart of Pharaoh being hardened. And the more we hear from the Creator the direction we should take, the harder we fight it. And when we get to a place where everything that religion is built upon begins to fall, begins to die, because son means to build, and the firstborn son being killed speaks to the idea of the death or the destruction of religion in our lives. And as those pillars begin to fall, we begin to look for a way out. And that way out is crossing to the other side of the river, moving from one life to the other. And when we do that, we think that we are home free, only to realize that there are so many things that are embedded in us that we have gotten from religion until it is necessary for us to be purged. The whole idea of having to take communion every first Sunday, the idea. Let me back up and say something about this communion every first Sunday. We did that because we have been taught to do that. However, the first church that I pastored, it was a third Sunday, I believe it was. So it was whatever Sunday that they chose to do it. But the first Sunday, it was supposed to be done. And we did everything we could, because I was one of them, to fight to get that communion put back on that first Sunday, because we were taught that that's where it's supposed to be. Those type of religious things are the idea of having to be water baptized before we could be accepted into the family of our Creator. Not realizing that the spiritual baptism that shows us who we are, it does not give us acceptance, because we're already accepted. And when we think about that, what do we see? We actually see in that wilderness, Aaron becomes, Aaron is initiated, he and his sons are initiated into the priesthood. He and the builders are initiated into the priesthood, and Moses remains Moses, the leader. So what we see is that Moses goes to a higher elevation, a place where there is he's seeking direction, understanding. He's seeking to understand loving kindness. What do we do with this? How do I judge the people who you've placed in my charge? How is it that I, quote unquote, pastor these people, my flock, in this wilderness? How is it that I can draw out of them those things that religion has embedded in them? And what happens too often is that Aaron at some point intervenes. And what that means is we are seeking direction as to how we are to bring our people to a place of purging, a place where all of these religious antics can be purged from them, and they can begin to see that these rituals are actually distractions from the reality of knowing who we are. And while we are seeking that, sometimes in us, we seek to revert to where we were. And that means that we do what Aaron did. We let the people do what they want to do. Or we follow the people rather than having them to follow us. We allow the idol gods to persist. We allow the communion table to be set aside as being holy, more holy than the consciousness of our people. We allow the pulpit to become a place that is off limits to everyone, with the exception of the pastor. We allow the position, the office, our title of pastor to be more powerful when it is applied to men, and we exclude females from that. All of these are things that takes place in the wilderness. They are the golden calves of our lives that we have to grind into dust and free ourselves of. And in doing so, what we see is that this story about Moses and Aaron is simply speaking about where we are. Moses remained the spiritual being that he was told he was to be, and that is God to the people. And Aaron, the priest, became religion. Aaron, the priest, laid the foundation for religion, and that's what this allegory is telling us. This allegory is telling us, if you're not careful when you are seeking spiritual guidance, the things that have been embedded in you will overtake you, and you will be guided by the power of the religion of the people, as opposed to being guided by the essence with which you were created. And when you are guided by the essence with which you were created, you realize, as Moses did, that you are God to the people. Now think about this. It is said that when Moses was in the mountain and the golden calf was made, and they were reveling in their worship, their submission to this golden calf, that the Creator says to Moses, to go down to your people. He referenced them as being Moses' people because he had told Moses that you are Elohim to them. And by virtue of that, it is saying that we must be strong enough, committed enough to the journey that we do not allow the golden calves of our religious upbringing to overshadow the spiritual essence of who we are. We must at all times recognize that yes, we may make mistakes. We may even falter at times, but we cannot allow ourselves to get weakened to the point or disillusioned to the point where we allow the rituals of religion to raise their heads again and take authority in our lives or in the lives of our people. We must at all times remain Elohim, no different than what's happening now with the Rittenhouse verdict. There are those, this Sunday morning, there are those who are having prayer vigils. There are those who are arming themselves physically. And there are those who are organizing themselves politically. And very few are stepping back from it and seeking the direction of which way to travel and what does all of this mean. And if we are looking at it through the eyes of Moses on this journey, or through the allegory about Moses and Aaron, what we are seeing is that those who are having prayer vigils, those who are arming themselves, those who are organizing politically, those they are in the encampment of Pharaoh as well as Aaron. However, those who are looking to see the spiritual essence, the spiritual answer to what happened, the spiritual clarity on it, are in that place where Moses was in the mountain when he was there for 40 days and 40 nights. That's where we are to be at this very moment. And in doing so, we began to see something. We began to see that this keeps the need, the necessity of bringing balance and peace in the forefront. What happened when we look at it from the perspective of our minds, we see the injustices in it. We see the imbalance in it. We see the inequality in it. We see all of these things. We see the racism. We see the Dred Scott decision all over again. We see all of these things. But when we look at it from our soul, we see the pressure that's being applied to the souls of humanity to force their eye open so that they will clearly see not only the injustices, but they will clearly see the answer. And the answer being that we have to change the way we think. We have to change our perception of each other. We have to change the perception that carried us to a place of greed, manipulation, and all of those other things that we need to rid ourselves of in this wilderness. We have to recognize that the plague in Egypt is no different than the plague today. Not only did it cause everyone to pause and to take notice of what's happening, but it also caused those to pause who were searching for truth and separated them from what their eyes could see and showed them what the eye needs to see. and in doing so, has brought humanity to a place of a crossroads of change. And that crossroad of change is taking place right in front of us. And those who are searching for truth, those who are spiritual, those who seek to be separated from religious antics and religious rituals, those are the ones who must keep their focus on the journey for truth and understand the reality of the pause that this has caused, and see not only the Rittenhouse decision, but wait also for the verdicts in Brunswick, Georgia, as well as Charlottesville, and see the messages that are being shown to us by the outcomes of these events. Are there any questions or comments?
Pastor,
Yes, ma'am.
I've been following the Arbery trial, and I got kind of upset a little bit when I saw all those black pastors there at the courthouse. It's like they riding on this thing for notoriety. I may be wrong, but I was just like, won't y'all just go home or go wherever you need to go and treat your people right, feed them the right stuff? I mean, I think they was just a distraction.
Well, all of this is distraction, Evelyn. And I don't think that all of them are riding on it. I really don't. That's all they know to do. If that's all you know how to do, that's what you do. And I can speak that from experience. I remember being instrumental in organizing the African Liberation Day March in D.C. 250,000 people showed up. And we felt like that would bring about change. I remember the voter registration trials we did put our lives in jeopardy. We thought that would bring about change. And we were doing what we knew or felt that was right to do at that moment. Keep in mind that you're in a different spiritual space than the overwhelming majority of the people who who claim to be spiritual. You're in a spiritual space that Christians have never been in. Muslims have never been in. You're in a spiritual space that is necessary for us to be in. If you notice, Aaron and
Hello?
Guess we lost him somehow.
Pastor, if you're listening, we can't hear you.
Are y'all still on?
I'm still on.
I'm still on.
We're here. We just lost Pastor somehow.
I'm still on.
And he probably doesn't know we lost him.
Well, Audrey, you asked the question that I was going to ask up front, so thank you.
Okay. I'm still trying to remember what I was gonna say about it. I thought,
What
Well,
I thought was he killed white guys and he still got off. That's something there.
yeah, but I guess what I was thinking about and gonna say was that all these laws that got written to sort of keep us in our place, meaning we African Americans, is the same laws that let him get off for killing those people. It's just ridiculous. But now all the people involved are white. So I'm just wondering how that's gonna play.
Yeah, I imagine there are going to be folks who are upset about it for sure.
Well, they still trying to say the law was right in the process of what it did.
Thank you, sir.
All right.
So, Ron, would you continue, please?
Yes, sir. I guess what I'm saying is I try to look at everything spiritually as you know, as it unfolds. And yesterday, as Audrey said, I wasn't really surprised at my reaction. My initial reaction was anger or frustration and then anger. And I think it came from talking to some of the people at work. But when I stopped and thought about it, and very briefly, I saw all of our lessons come back to me. And I'm sitting there just thinking of all the stuff we talked about. And then it just kind of question pops in my head. What if you keep living the same thing over and over again until we see and understand who we are? Meaning that if you see an African being crucified and being beaten till he's unrecognizable, what if that keeps happening? What if he keeps dying over and over again? And all we're seeing is the differences of the times that we're in. So the Romans have been replaced by someone else now. The weapons are being replaced by something else now. But it's still a confrontation between the African and the European as it was at that starting point, if you want to call it the crucifixion starting point, which I do not believe it was, but that's another story. So when I look at that and see it from that perspective, it's easy to see that I can have an Egyptian experience here in my lifetime, feeling the religion and being in a cramped space. It's easy, as Pastor described, the wilderness experiences, that I'm still having wilderness experiences as I expand, as I evolve my spirituality, and as I become more and more aware of who I am. But the death part, we seem to disconnect from, and we disconnect. I mean, we're not saying we're not a part of it, because each and every one of us feels that pain when it happens. But I mean, disconnect from the history of it, and we don't see it as a continuous thing. And so I think when you talk about seeing and recognizing that you Elohim is quite real, and it puts us in a different place as for spiritual elevation and your recognition, and not being powerless, but even seeing things from the perspective that we're not reactive when things happen. Uh, and this is all a part of me trying to grasp at some part of understanding as well as you are. So it's not saying I have all the answers or even part of the answer. I guess I can say this is a supposition, and I'm trying to see this. Because as we talk about this, as we understand who we are, these things keep happening. And I think they happen for a reason for us to dig deeper or to go further into who we are and what this journey is supposed to be, and maybe to contemplate where we are on it at this particular time. So I think all of these things are related. Even in looking at, as Barbara explained, the burning bush, the nuances of that, the details of it. Even the thing that caught my attention was Moses kills someone and he escapes into the wilderness from Egypt. And then the scripture says Aaron will come out to meet you. How did Aaron know where to go? It had been 40 years since Moses had left. So those little things like that, we are spiritual things that we little details that are speaking to us, that I appreciate that we look at it and try to unravel and put meaning to, not only from the historical perspective, but from the spiritual perspective of who we are right now. I'm done, I think.
Thank you, sir. But you're not. I see. Excuse me. I understand what you're saying, Ron, and I agree with you. I want to offer a supposition, if I may. Suppose that what we call the Old Testament, suppose that portion is the whole Old Testament is an allegory. And the reason it is because there are a lot of things that were not written during the early stages in the creation of in the earth presence of mankind. The stories in the Old Testament, especially the first 5 books, those stories can be found in any culture, with the exception, of course, of one. With any indigenous people, those stories can be found. They are different words, but exactly the same story is being told. It speaks to the creation of everything that is. It speaks to the divinity of man. It speaks to the battle that man has with recognizing who it is as opposed to who it's trying to be. These stories speak to the desire to receive commands from the one who created us, so we know how to travel. However, when we get beyond the stories of the Old Testament, suppose this is where it picks up with Jesus. The prophets, after the 5 books, and then Jesus. What am I saying? Suppose that even with the lives of the prophets, the stories are told in order to convey a spiritual truth. And that spiritual truth that's being conveyed by the prophets is a road that leads to the divine becoming human, meaning that there was a man born who, at the age of 12, struggled with who he was supposed to be and ended up being with the Essenes until age 33, when he showed up again in the presence of everyone else. And in doing so, he started to teach as we are doing today. But what he was teaching was how we are supposed to be and how we can get to that place of recognizing who we are. And he actually was Elohim in this body. And following what he taught, there were others, Muhammad, etc. And if we look at it from this perspective, then what we see is that if you look at the story of Buddhism, it tells the stories of the Old Testament, yet it also catapults us to a place of enlightenment, being enlightened as to who we are. So if that is indeed the way things are, then would it not be, is it not saying to us that the nuances of the stories that are told are definitely to be unraveled so that we can have a clearer picture of who we are, not just in terms of being Elohim, but the other personality traits that we possess as because of being in these bodies. And we were created the way we are, and all of these adversities were created for our purpose. And the purpose of these adversities was for us to conquer them so that we could be as Elohim is spiritually, even though we are, while we are Elohim in these bodies. And the pattern for that was laid by some of the prophets in terms of what they saw, as well as by the life that Jesus led, followed by others who walked in his shoes. Can you see that? Are there any comments about that? Or is that far-fetched? Don't everybody speak at once.
It's not far-fetched. You just said a lot. I'm just trying to chew on it. That's all. But yeah, it's not far-fetched at all. Just trying to piece it all together.
And to try to, while you're doing that, in order to try my best to make it even clearer, there are stories that are told about Raymond's and Raymond's. There are stories that are told about Al-Qatam's cabin, and it is a mixture of fiction and reality, and they were told in such a way that people would remember them, because not only of the harshness of it, but also of the times of joy. Not only of the times of joy, but also a meshing of the joy and the pain. There are stories that were told like that in order for us to be able to capture what actually was going on. If we were to listen at some of the stories that came out of our enslavement or the enslavement of our ancestors, what we would see or hear are stories that were told because they were not able to write it. They told stories and they embellished them so that they would be remembered, so that we would never forget where we were, where we came from, and where we are right now. Some of those stories that were told they were included in them were African and spiritual aspects of our lives. The whole concept of sitting with the dead until they are interned. The concept community, meaning that the concept of the community being one body, looking out for each other. These are African concepts, and the idea of knowing that there is a spiritual being greater than us but having been manipulated to the point where that being was transformed into the enslavers, or to look like the enslavers, so that everything that we look at as being divine would look like them. So all of these, if that is true, and it is, then let's look at the scriptures in the same way and see how the Native Americans told the story of creation, and how the Nanook in Alaska told the story of creation, and on and on and on and on. Then each one of them had someone, in terms of their stories that they were telling, to come into this earth and to show them how to be guided to a place of spirituality, be it what they call a medicine man or whatever, but the purpose was the same purpose that Jesus served. Does that make sense, or is that clear? Or does it help?
It helps,
Thank you.
I think one of the things that you said that I pick out that is extremely important that I think we've lost is the sense of individuality and the sense of separateness and division, and this is mine and this is yours, and we're separated by, we have boundaries up. In spirituality, there is no boundaries. And you speak of indigenous people, and that includes the Africans and the tribes that we all have in our ancestry. We were not separated. We were one. And even if I was from a different tribe, we did not war with each other, and we shared the land, we shared the forest, we shared the food. And if there was a dispute, it wasn't settled by warfare as we know warfare today. And somewhere along the line, as we bought into religion and this falseness of who we are, we've lost that. I was reading something about the Samaria this morning, actually last night and this morning. But in Samaria, we know that was a part of the region that the Israelites tried to avoid. They did not come there. They did not associate with those people. But after King Solomon died, if you want to know the history of Samaria, after King Solomon died, the nation of Israel was divided into two tribes. And Samaria was the northern kingdom. It was the capital of the northern kingdom. And it was called Israel, but they soon just called the whole region Samaria. But what happened is when the Assyrians invaded the northern kingdom and took them captive, what they intentionally did was scatter them all about. And the intent was to destroy the culture of Israel. So when they scattered them all about, after a few years, they gathered some of them and brought them back to the region. And the whole purpose was that the remnant of people that was still left in the region, they wanted to destroy that culture as well. So what we have is what you see today. Here we are in the 21st century, and the African is still fighting for his identity. He has no idea who he is, and he's struggling to get back to his root. He's struggling to see how to get back to the beginning. And he doesn't know if he's religion. He holds on to some of the things that are in his DNA, that's part of his culture, but he doesn't feel like he belongs here. And that struggle continues. So all of that is a part of what we're talking about when you look at, I'm sorry, somebody say something. But no, when you look at, go ahead, Pastor, if you see so.
No, I cleared my throat, that's all.
Okay. But all I'm saying is we are at that point. We are the remnant that have looked at, we have focused at the burning bush. and we have focused enough to see the Creator and to see ourselves, and now we're trying to regain our footing on that. So yeah, I agree with what Pastor said, and the beginning is real, and we don't lose focus of that, or just holding on to what we have, because as was said before, every time someone dies, you feel that. You feel it. It hits your pulse. It interrupts your rhythm, because that's a part of who you are. So that's no coincidence that's where we are. All we're trying to do now is regain our focus. Because I think we're still in a good place. As much as what happened yesterday may have hurt, we're in a good place. And we need to not let the hurt and the pain remain our focus. That's all.
And I agree with that.
I may have taken you off to what you said, but I apologize. I hope it ties in some kind of way.
No. That's no need for apology. I do believe that the course that we take is what we are supposed to. I do agree with what you're saying. I do believe that we were scattered for a reason. I do believe that our cultural knowledge is vague for a reason. And I believe it's vague because our only hope for any deliverance is loving kindness. And our only hope for loving kindness is embracing that we are Elohim and completing the task for which we were brought into this earth. And that is for Elohim to bring the animalistic mindset of mankind to a place of it accepting who it is so it can become human, and that is Elohim in a physical body. However, I want to touch on something else that you said, and all of us said without even thinking about it. The racist nature of the word tribe. Think about that. The only people who are designated as tribes are Africans and Native Americans, and indigenous people where Europeans have settled or taken over, like in Australia. If a tribe are people who have commonality, yet they may speak a different language, then why is it that the Scandinavians are not a tribe and those who are in France are not a tribe also? Why is it that the only ones that are designated as tribes are people of color? Think about it. That designation further divides. It tells us that there is a wall between us simply because we don't speak the same language, even though we have physical attributes that are the same, and we have beliefs that are the same, and for the most part, we recognize spirituality and we recognize the divinity of everything that exists, yet we are designated as different tribes, while at the same time the European sees itself as being one tribe only. Can you see what I'm saying?
Yes,
Ron?
sir.
Does that make sense to you?
It does make sense, and it goes back to what you and I think Audrey were talking about, those code words. Everything is meant to divide. That's the power in it, and even or to make us feel like it's a dirty word, or it's less than to be something
dehumanizing,
other than what
Ron.
they are. Yeah.
It's dehumanizing.
And so,
Yeah.
So what that actually said. Let me finish this up, Marilyn. Okay. What that actually says is that you don't have a common origin, and you don't have a common goal. There is no commonality in your humanity at all, and it gives the space for others to subconsciously treat you as though you are less than human. Okay, Vermeil.
So, is that the underlying premise for white supremacists? They want all non-tribes, quote, to consider themselves to be one?
I don't get your question.
Well, you said people of color are called tribes,
Yes.
and the rest are, they're segregating out who they don't want. So for white supremacists, that seems to be an issue across the world. Is that their underlying premise, that they want whites to be seen as just one and that's it?
First of all, it's not just one who calls himself a white supremacist. It's all white people. All.
Okay.
And when I say all, I mean all. Because white people do not see themselves as being racist. They do not see themselves as being the arbiters of divisions, especially those who call themselves liberals. They don't see that. And I'll give you a case in point. I was speaking with a pastor, and we were talking about, it's a Caucasian pastor, and we were talking about meeting. And he wanted us to break up in small groups. And I said to him that I don't particularly like that idea. And he said he wanted to do it so people could get to know each other. And I said that the reason I don't like that idea is because I believe that if people talk and be honest about what they feel and what they believe, they will get to know each other. So, and then my next statement about that was that is a method of control that Caucasians use in order to isolate people. So when he spoke back with me, he said to me that some of his people had raised the question about breaking down into small groups. And he related to them what was said in our conversation. And they were like, oh, they never saw it as the Caucasians using methods of manipulation in order to exert control. So when I say all, I'm saying, as has been said by many people, it is impossible to grow up in, you say this country, but in this world, and be educated in the European setting and not be racist. Impossible.
Okay, thank you.
And for those who are questioning, racism runs so deep until it has taught us to be perpetuators of racism without even knowing it. Now, there's no such thing as reverse racism. In the Barkey case, I think back in '74, where this whole concept of reverse racism took center stage, that in itself is an effort to minimize the damage that this nation has done to people of color. Questions, comments?
Definitely understand everything that has been said, and as you mentioned, the white people and the white supremacists, comparing the difference between them. They believe in the same thing. It's just that one of them believes it and is conscious of it, while the others that you've been talking about, in terms of the liberals, in a sense, they have certain ideas and beliefs that play a role in how they perceive and maneuver throughout the world, but don't actually notice the underlying beliefs. And in a sense, it's kind of baked in in terms of all the conditioning that the world gives in terms of continuing, for example, to signal that you are better. And it doesn't even have to explicitly be said that you are better, but in terms of noticing how you are treated and how others are treated. A comedian once joked about someone who clearly that white who honestly didn't see themselves as being racist, saying that a white person wouldn't actually want to trade lives with him, and he was a very rich person, just some average white person, because they understood the value in a sense of their whiteness, even they don't consciously walk around thinking about it. From the bigger picture, what I keep on thinking about is, I don't know the verse. I know a lot of people on here know it, about the war with the physical world and Connor things. Thinking back to the Rittenhouse case, and a lot of us kind of already knowing what the aftermath was, is because deep down we understand and know that the result that happened in a sense yesterday was only feedback in terms of where the people were in their growth, and in a sense going to war with those spiritual things and dealing with, and I mean in this word on purpose, those demons that they have yet to be willing to face. The demons that I'm talking about, as we go back to talking about white supremacy and it kind of like being baked in, is the idea that I am great, this nation is great, and what this nation is actually built on and what it represents in terms of the principles. And in order for there to be, doing air quotes so no one can see me, true justice, what was justice, or the definition or the true principle of justice in this nation's at its birth? We cannot confront what actually happened without actually saying what this nation was built upon. We want to change and we no longer agree with it. So you can't wear the birth of this nation, the supposedly pride of this nation, as a badge of honor and something that you're very proud of, but at the same time expect anything to change. And that thing that is being changed is that all ideas that we're talking about, looking at people as being tribes, people being as less than, the division, et cetera, et cetera. But that case itself, that is very minor. That is only a feedback loop in terms of where essentially collectively as humans we are. So we do the same things individually or personally, and we do the same thing collectively. So it's as if we are working on these things as an individual and as a group project that all of us are involved in. What we see out in the world is part of our collective group project. And what we see, in a sense, is, like I said, the feedback. Going back to the principle of war, and I don't like using the word war, but the things that are matter or spiritual things, whereas the physical world is just a feedback, is no different from us when we're daydreaming or when we're thinking about a scenario or how a scenario might play out in our mind. And we can do many, many, many different scenarios, and we can pretend in our head like we're just imagining something, whatever thing we're working with in our head, it actually turning out in multiple ways. Well, the same thing is actually happening when we think about the physical realm. The physical realm is another instance of us playing out certain things, but then being able to see it in the physical world, in the physical form. But what is dictating all of these things is the spirituality behind it and what we are actually creating. Hopefully I didn't get too far off.
What did I tell you about apologies?
Well, I should rephrase that. If anyone needs clarity or want me to tie any gaps that they may be in, please feel free to let me know.
Well, Sheldon, I think your point is well taken, because even somebody like Biden, he can say Rittenhouse is a white supremacist, but then on the other hand, he can say the jury has spoken and we should abide by it. Well, how can he see the white supremacy but not see the injustice of the judicial system? So it's almost as if, you know, the one was just lip service and the other was who he truly is. You know what I mean?
And what he truly is, he's not actually intentionally in the sense. I honestly don't think he's intentionally
Right. He's
being
oblivious.
racist. Yes, what he's doing is he is trying to I want to say, I don't know why I want to say cuddle with, but he's trying to hold on to this idea of the United States is a great nation. And because the United States was built on certain principles, and I believe in these principles, I have to believe that the judicial system, which is so great, played out the way that that things should be, because our great judicial system is completely flawless. So when we look at, we talk about religion a lot. Religion pretty much does the same thing in terms of I have to hold on to something, even though it needs to be cut off, or I need to change my belief, because this is what my identity is in. And in a sense, I think Pastor said it very early on, you're clinging and holding on tightly to this particular thing. What Biden is doing to this, holding on to the ideals of this nation as being great, is no different than someone hating being tied up in church or not being fed in a sense, but staying there and having to stay there because of their family, and they can't let go because I just can't walk away from this thing. And the walking away of that thing is actually what creates the change and the growth, so to speak. Going back to the bush with Moses, going back to Jesus being tempted by Satan with the stone. Okay, you say you believe with in your Lord, and your Lord is so great, then turn this stone into bread so that you can eat because you're starving right now. All of that was temptation, but it was internal temptation. It was just internal demon. It was as if the demon was just, Satan was only those, I don't want to say negative thoughts, but those thoughts that were making Jesus at the time think that he was less than or doubting himself. And so once he refused, or in a sense went to battle with Satan, he was actually just battling with his thoughts and overcoming them. And then all of a sudden that hindrance no longer no longer exists. It ceased to exist. So when this, in terms of the outcomes, I guess things change when those individuals begin to change and see more so who they are. But first, they must face the demon. They must face and acknowledge where they are, take inventory before they can then move on. That is the first step. And that's when everything magically, I don't want to say magically changes, but that's when everything changes instantly. It takes an internal work and being honest and truthful. And I'm talking from a collective standpoint. It takes that truthfulness and facing ourselves when those changes actually take place.
I want to address a couple of things. One is Biden told the truth. He said the jury system worked. He told the truth. It did work the way it was designed to work. the other thing is the Brunswick case. Well, as citizen arrest, that came out of slavery because every white man was considered a deputy and could use his position as being a white male to arrest anyone who was of color and who he felt was had escaped from slavery, even if they had not. That citizen arrest comes from there. The other thing I want to address is this.
But before you go,
No matter.
Before you go forward, because you say you're about to make a next point, to that point about any white person or any white man could make an arrest, embedded, and this is what we're talking about, racism kind of being embedded. Socially and collectively, it was accepted that there were two different classes of people, and the white men automatically had authority over everyone. So automatically, in that sense, there was a caste system in terms of one person is more valuable. If you think about like chess, or you think about checkers with the regular little pieces and the kings, I can tell you what to do. I have authority over you. You're less than me immediately, and that's baked in. Whether it's ever explicitly said or not, that's what was accepted and is still seen and accepted today, even though it's not outwardly said. I'm finished. Thank you.
You're welcome, sir. Any comments or questions about that? No matter what we talk about, we always get back to one place, and that is racism. Why?
Because
we can go back and we can go ahead.
Because
Go ahead, Ms. Barber.
we don't follow the wisdom of knowing the end and the beginning. And what all of the stories and the allegories have shown us, even when Ron said those people in Samaria, that's what they call them, those people in Samaria. Well, those people in Samaria were originally from the same father of many nations as they were. And so we've done so much to put ourselves in divisive camps, divisive tribes, divisive religions, divisive whatevers, that we don't see the end and the beginning. The end and the beginning is that we are all one. And that's the essence of it all. We don't see ourselves as one and the same.
Right. When you look at Judah, the southern kingdom, the northern kingdom, Samaria, and you were looked down upon if you intermarried with someone from Samaria, that is no different than the brown bag society in Charleston. If you were darker than a brown bag, you could not be a part of the society. And they frowned upon anyone who intermarried with someone who was darker than them. So when I brought up the concern about the thing about racism, I concur totally with what Barbara is saying, because we are perpetuators of it. We go back to race because that is the central theme in the scriptures. That is the elephant in the room that no one really wants to address in the scriptures. That is the concept that our Creator brought into existence for the purpose of bringing us to a place where we would take our rightful role and bring everyone who is unaware of who they are to a place of awareness. Regardless of what we talk about, we can skirt it all we want to. We can walk around it, but the central theme in every single thing that needs to be altered in this earth is racism. And is racism not because it exists? Is racism because it is a makeup, a cultural thing that was made up by people who knew the least about their origin in terms of spirituality? Made up by a people who are the most vicious, violent people that the earth has ever seen. A construct that is predicated on the superiority of the minimum amount of people on this earth. A construct that is so ingrained until everything that we look at, everything that we look at that's positive, the face of it is European. It does not matter that Jesus was an African. He's presented as a European. It does not matter that Moses is an African, presented as a European. It does not matter that the Native Americans were here and Africans had been to this continent prior to Columbus. Yet, here we are. Racism is the centralized concept that we are chosen to bring to an end. We are to take this concept and do the same thing with it that has been done with those beliefs of our religions that we know are not true. We did not hate parents, pastors, teachers who taught us these things. We recognized that they were not right. However, we also recognized that they were only teaching what they had been taught and what they believed. Just as that is so, that's how we have to deal with Europeans. They believe that they are superior because that's all they know. And the superiority is enforced. And right now, the majority of the people think that the reason a nation is superior to another nation is because of its war powers and its wealth in terms of money. And those are concepts that has been strengthened by racism. This country would not be wealthy as it is without racism. This world would not exist as it does without racism. The powers of the military might of Europeans would not exist without fear of being defeated, without fear of believing that the people who you have brutalized would do the same to you. Not understanding that the people that you brutalize are the very people who can show you who you are. So we have no space to hate or dislike people because they don't know any better. We have no space to desire to separate from a people who needs us. It is our obligation to address the elephant in the room every opportunity we get, Why? Because if you do not address the elephant in the room, the elephant will remain there and will always be a problem. There is no way around it. We talked about it. Jesus having been beaten beyond recognition because he's an African. But the only thing that the European sees about an African in relationship to Jesus is that he carried Jesus' cross. That's the only thing. The idea, the concept of Solomon being a Caucasian, Cleopatra being a Caucasian, come on. All of these things are racism is embedded in all of these things. And the construct of racism did not have its origin in people of color. The construct of racism had its origin in Europeans, and the reason it has grown so powerful is because we did not take the stand and change the course of this earth and its consciousness. Now it is imperative that we do not falter in this. Yes, it is Groundhog Day. Every time we wake up, the same thing happens all over again, continuously. We have different clothes. We ride cars instead of horses. We are able to do conference calls. We can send mail other than on the stagecoach. All of these things are different, yet everything else is the same. The energy hasn't changed. The consciousness of humanity has not changed. The desires of mankind has not changed. We are experiencing Groundhog Day. The runs mentioned the idea of Jesus being beaten beyond recognition in relationship to the same thing happening in this country. That's what I'm talking about. It's over and over again. The two guys who were white who were killed in Kenosha, the reason no one cared is because they were considered to be aligned with Africans. So it did not matter. Their lives became worthless when they made that alignment. And therefore, regardless of the illegality of a youth, someone underage crossing a state line, which is a federal crime, with a weapon in order to kill someone, walking free, based upon the theory of self-defense, when he is the provocateur in the whole event. You don't show up, nothing happens. So here we are. Let's not be uncomfortable when the conversation and understandings, whether it be Abraham or Moses, whether it be Rebecca or Rachel, whether it be Jesus or whether it be David, it doesn't matter. We have to continuously address the elephant in the room. And in doing so, we cannot be angry with people because of their racist tendencies. Because if we are going to be angry with white supremacists, we may well be angry with the pastors in these churches with white Jesus is hanging on the wall. Because you are saying that white is supreme. You're lying to yourself. Are there any questions about that? Because this idea of racism, what has taken place is we have been told you playing the race card, and that gives power to the racist institutions that desire to stay as they are. We cannot submit to that. The reason we are told we are playing the race card is to silence us about the truth. The discomfort of the discussion of race is more discomforting to some people who are of African descent than it is to Caucasian. There is a deep hatred in the hearts of a lot of Africans, yet they don't recognize it. When we feel like or believe that we should be separate, when we believe that they are less than, that is an expression of hatred. When we think that we are more knowledgeable in terms of them being less than we are intellectually, that's also actually hatred, because if you give opportunity, you can teach if they are willing to learn. And I am saying that just like we as Africans are representative of a desire for truth in the midst of other Africans, influencing them to change the direction of their thought, that same journey we must apply to the Caucasian. If we don't take the opportunity to teach, then we are perpetuating what we want to change. It doesn't matter whether it's 10 Caucasians or whether it's 2. The objective is to get it into that consciousness so that that energy can be transformed, just like we are making every effort to get into the consciousness of Africans and people of color that you are not inferior. That transformation is not taking place because we are knocking on doors and going to people individually. It is because we understand that when we put things in the macro, they are picked up by people around the world, no different than what happened with George Floyd's murder. The world, the entire world was in protest against that. And by virtue of that, we ought to be able to see that when we engage Europeans in discussions about what's real, what the truth is, it is then that we begin to influence the society to the extent that change will come about. Now, we as a people influence. The society doesn't change until Caucasians change it. The European must change the society. Why? Because we cannot force people to change how they think and how they feel. Society doesn't change until hearts change, until thought patterns change. That is when society changes. Therefore, our influence must be the teacher so that those thoughts can change, thus changes society. I'm done. Any questions? Or is that clear?
It's clear. I just want to speak something though. One thing I want to say, just an observation of something that caught my eye on the news the other day, Friday, I think. It is funny or ironic, however you want to look at it, that we want to protest the upcoming Olympics in China because of their human rights stance. And, you know, the things that go on in this country as far as human rights goes, that's another conversation, I suppose, but it is one that is very real. The other thing I want to make sure that I've heard throughout the day, and separation, the concept of separation is quite real. And what you see or what you imagine in your mind, in your head, is what your reality is. And I have to remind myself sometimes to see my number line. My number line doesn't have numbers, it has shades on it, shades of color. And on one side of that number line is black, and on the one side is white, and all the other colors in between. But everything on that number line is related in some way. At the extreme end of it, it's hard for you to see yourself because you don't relate to the principle that side of the line sees. But nevertheless, it is a part of you because it breathes the same air. It is the same creator. It just doesn't know that it's there. And I think situations like we have witnessed this year in that verdict, this week with this verdict has made us feel like we are totally separated and not on that same number line. But if we are totally separated, we cannot bring about change. We have to see that no matter how repulsive things get and how damaging they seem to us in a human way, it is still something that we have, we are part of, whether it's bringing death in those ways or whatever the case may be. So I think we diminish it further by buying into the separation that there is an African and a Caucasian or European. Of course there is, but in a spiritual sense, we are the few that can see it from a deeper meaning. And we have to keep that in perspective. Something Sheldon said was talking about the inception of this country and those concepts and principles. Well, those concepts and principles are violence and separation, and I take what's yours and I make it mine, and it's all based on racism. So to look at a court case based on those principles, we cannot look at that and expect to see righteousness and balance. So it has to come through us in our recognition that we are Elohim, and that, if nothing else, should tell us that we are not powerless. And there may be days like Saturdays, Sundays, and Mondays that we have to do on Tuesdays, Wednesdays, and Thursdays. But maybe it may come times that we have to call each other and talk and just reinforce who we are, remind ourselves, vent whatever we need to do. But let us not lose focus of that, because I think the spirituality of the human is being awakened as we speak, and we are the humans that it is coming to.
Ron, Pastor, when you talk, may I add something to what Ron just said? I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, you go ahead.
I was just going to make a comment because I've been listening to what we were saying and about the separation, and that we're really not separated, and everything that we said today. And of course, I'm in total agreement with it. But as I was thinking about the trial, I had a thought that began to change everything for me. And I want to see if I'm on the right page or if I'm missing it totally. When we spoke with the church from California on last Sunday, Audrey talked about the trauma that is embedded in our spiritual makeup and our spiritual DNA because of what we lived through. I watched the faces of the people on Zoom, and they teared up and they cried because they said, number one, they didn't know and they didn't understand that because they've never lived through it. And whether you say you have white privilege or whether you're aware that you have it, they came to a realization that they didn't know because their lives are different because of the privileges that they've had. Now, as I go back to this trial, I'm rethinking everything that I saw, because what if what we were to take away from the trial was not so much of the verdict, but the impact that it had on the families of the slain victims. And let me tell you what I mean by that. I am now reassessing in my mind what the word woke means. The people who were marching with Black Lives Matter, who were slain, were woke in a physical sense. What if spiritual awakening comes about as a result of trauma? And through that trauma, we seek to understand what it means to be Elohim, and we awaken to who we are as a result of being Elohim. So what if the trial, the outcome of the trial wasn't what we should shine the spotlight on, but what if we should shine the spotlight on the victims' families? Because I heard the interview, and for the first time, I felt that they felt our trauma. And as a result of that, now they have to make a decision. Do I stay in a place of hatred, or do I bring spiritual balance to everything by rising above this and being Elohim in the situation? So if we move away from just being physically woke to being in a place of being spiritually awakened to things, that comes as a direct result to me of the trauma that we have endured and lived through, and we are still standing. Now they have been put in that position and they feel that. And if that is the case and that's truly what happened, then were we not responsible for the verdict? Because we want them to be awakened into spiritual truth. And if it comes about through trauma, now they can walk in my shoes and identify with the trauma that we have endured as a result of being in this country. And now the bigger picture is now from a place of empathy and understanding as a result of experience, you can now walk in the true reality of a spiritual awakening. Am I saying this wrong, or does that make sense, or is that just crazy?
No. I see exactly what you're saying. I agree with every bit of it, because we did do this. There's no doubt about that. It's a result of not only what we've desired, but what needed to be done in order for that trauma to be experienced. And if we are talking about how we spread, how we influence, then their traumatic experiences will also influence others who are like they are, and begin to see some semblance of an awakeness spiritually. So yes, I agree with you.
Okay.
Barbara Jean, or is there someone else wanting to respond or say something about what Kathy just presented?
Oh, I was going to simply add that, when Ron talked, he talked about Abram and then Abraham, and you as well mentioned Moses going to Egypt and going back, and it's almost like the concept of the Groundhog Day we were talking about, that they have to repeat what they're doing, but in the interim they establish memorials, if you will, the wells that Abraham dug whenever he went a certain place. And so what we're doing right now is the same thing. And so the issue about the Groundhog Day, it might seem that nothing has changed, but every time we lay those spiritual pillars as reminders, not only for us, but for those who come to awareness after us, that's significant, as much as the wells were significant, and the stones and the memorials that they set up whenever they kept going back to the same place. The people remembered, okay, this is the well, these are the wells that my fathers dug, in a sense. And so we're digging wells in a sense, and spiritually, and they will be remembered.
Okay, thank you, ma'am. Anyone else in questions to comment? Go ahead.
I was just saying I like that. I hadn't thought about it like that. Yeah, I like that. She's right.
And what's kind of odd about, different about that. These things will continue to happen, and the reason they have continued is because we did not see them as spiritual events. We saw them as political events. We thought that they were political events, therefore we could change them politically. Now that we see them as spiritual events, that's we begin to see that the spiritual is what changes it all.
I have a question then. Are we setting things in order, or they've already been set in order? By what we're learning, huh?
I'm sorry, go ahead, Evan. I thought you was done.
No. Yeah, I'm done. Go ahead.
We are setting things in order. Things are in disarray now. Everything is mixed up. We say it. We live in a crazy world. We say it. Something always is going on. I mean, come on. The trauma that we have experienced, not only has it resulted in PTSD, but we are also schizophrenic in order to survive. And that in itself is chaotic. So, yes, we are setting things back in order.
Hey, when you talked about the groundhog, it being Groundhog Day, I asked Ramel, is it really Groundhog Day? But she told me what you were talking about. I kind of went somewhere on that, but okay.
Okay, you did, but I'm glad she brought you back. So
I wasn't the only one either.
Okay. Are there any other comments or questions?
Yes, good afternoon, Pastor. Good afternoon, everyone. I just want to speak on, we're talking about, the burning bush. And I guess the question, that imposes on me is this is what, we're having, right in this moment. And then at the same time, if it is, then we talk about that it's the Caucasian that needs to be, the one who's able to resolve or deal with this racism issue. But I know that, in our dialogue, with the... Okay.
Would you mute your phones, please? Would you check your phones to make sure they are muted? Thank you. Go ahead, George.
Yeah, so I think that in our opportunity to be able to have this discussion, with the church family in California, I noticed that on the call that we were on, there was a great representation in terms of the feminine energy. And I think the question that I have is I did not, notice, too many Caucasian males, if any, matter of fact. But I think with the exception of the pastor, I really believe at least it's a starting point in terms of you, and again, him just having the opportunity to put it on the table. And at the same time, again, if we're talking about the importance of the feminine energy, which is well represented, then I think that's something that, I continue to, just put in meditation, that, hopefully there can be some balance in terms of us dealing with the truth of how maybe the Caucasian male feels, or if that is a concern at all. So I just wanted to make that point, if that has any, in the thought of moving forward. I'm done.
That's an observation that some others had made as well, George. And I did raise that question with the pastor when we talked, and he was questioning himself. And then what we found out was one of the males had a previous engagement, and two of them were traveling with their jobs. So he expressed to them, as well as others in that congregation, if they are true to what they say, the need for them to be there. However, I also believe that if they never show up, the birth of it comes through the feminine anyway. This is what I'm saying. You hear a lot of talk about the suburban white woman and how they are instrumental in determining a campaign, elections. Well, that is true. But also what is true is the African woman who turned Georgia blue. So what I'm saying is this. Those suburban white women had over 1 million people in D.C. with Trump's inauguration. Those same suburban white women are the ones who are going to be the instruments of change or the protectors of the status quo. Why do I say that? Because they are no different than any other female who is representative of feminine energy. They will birth the seed that we impregnate them with. We put the seed in the womb and they will birth it. Can you see that, George?
Yes, I can. Yes, I can.
Because they have been birthing the seed of the white male who has seen himself as being superior. So now it's time for a seed with African origin, with the depths of spirituality, so that that can be birthed within the midst of that community. Are there any other insights in that or questions? I take that then you not only see it clearly, but you agree.
Yes.
Are there any other comments or questions?
I have a comment. Good morning. This is Mary. I was thinking, as you said that, I thought about Rebecca and what she did. So when you're talking about the feminine, the birthing, giving birth, I mean, I can see that with the Caucasian female doing that to her kids, instilling in them what is righteous. That's all. That's thought.
Okay. Thank you. Anyone else? Okay. Are we done?
Never done.
Well, for today.
Okay.
I don't know what I'm gonna do with that smart mouth of yours.
You're in good company, Evelyn.
You're
Very
going
good company.
Do something with it.
Yeah, we're done. We're done. You can stop recording now, please.